All right, good morning, everyone. Ms. Spears, can you start with roll call, please?
Councilmember Moreno, present. Councilmember Harris, present. Councilmember Green, present. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the first resolution that we have is storm hardening and system resiliency docket. The committee will consider a resolution granting limited approval of proposed system resiliency and storm hardening projects. And I think that Ms. Spears, you and Mr. Tuizzolo, my chief of staff, will be presenting. And just to get a quick overview on what we're doing today, you all may recall that after Hurricane Ida, the New Orleans City Council put in place a resilience docket. And this particular docket asked Entergy New Orleans to start looking at a variety of different projects that would make our grid much stronger. And through a series of different stakeholder engagement processes and meetings, there were a big lump of projects that were presented to the City Council. As you all may recall from the very onset, the City Council has been very adamant about the fact that as we move these projects along, and we all know that increasing the resiliency and reliability of our grid is incredibly important, but we also have to do whatever we can to mitigate the impact to ratepayers and try to keep costs down as much as possible. And so whether it's federal funds or credits that can be applied or a variety of other different revenue streams that could be applied to the projects, that's always been our number one big priority. So Entergy sent to us a big lump of different projects. I believe they totaled roughly $1 billion. They were in two phases. The first phase, over $500 million. And, we look forward to figuring out the path to moving those projects forward. But what we're going to start with are the projects that have received federal funding. And there are three really exciting projects. One has to do with a big transmission upgrade that we're getting. And as you all may recall, during Hurricane Ida, it was actually transmission failures that caused the widespread outages that we had throughout our city and the reason why they lasted so long. There's also a battery storage project that we're going to talk about as well, along with some distribution like the poles and wires improvements that are going to be happening in New Orleans East as well. So a huge investment here in the city of New Orleans. We're incredibly thankful to the Biden administration for prioritizing New Orleans and prioritizing these projects. I also want to thank the company as well for hearing our call about how important it is to ensure that these major projects are not just on the backs of ratepayers, and for applying for these very important grants. And I know that you all will continue to apply for these really important grants as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to the both of you. Please introduce yourselves to the public and we can begin the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Andrew Tuizzolo. I'm Councilmember Moreno's Chief of Staff.
Good morning, council members. My name is Erin Spears. I am your Chief of Staff and Counsel for the Council Utilities Regulatory Office.
Thank you, y'all. I'm going to try to go through some of the high-level stuff that relates to both the trajectory of this docket and also with the decision that the Council is faced with today. As Councilmember Moreno noted, the intention of this docket was to find a path to make our electrical grid more reliable and resilient. This is an important thing, not just for our businesses and for our institutions, but critically for our residents. Obviously, we saw during Hurricane Ida that the need for electricity and reliable electricity can be a matter of life and death, and it is a matter of economic life and death for the city because a reliable electrical grid is something that all businesses need and all people need in order to survive and thrive. So when we started this, the council, as Councilmember Moreno noted, in November, directly after the failures of Ida, we began a docket and invited a number of people, a number of groups and stakeholders, community groups and stakeholders, to join this docket to give us input about how to create a stronger electrical grid. Some of the folks that have participated, I would say robustly, were the folks at Together New Orleans, the Alliance for Affordable Energy, of course, the Sewage and Water Board, the Interfaith Climate Coalition, others, obviously the company as well. And here again was an opportunity for not just the electric utility to play, but also here for the community stakeholders, because ultimately all of these decisions have to be made by our community as a whole, as represented by this council, because all of these things have both advantages and disadvantages, of course, and they have consequences both from a cost perspective and opportunities from a resilience and reliability perspective. So we've held a number of technical conferences which were public, and there were some plans filed both in 2022 and 2023. Here we are in now 2024. These processes do usually take some time to make sure that there is enough input from everybody. It's really important that the community obviously have opportunity to read this. This is dense material, and these are big decisions. So we took a little time. So as the council member noted, the company came forward with a large proposal. They're not the only stakeholder to make proposals, but they are obviously the owners of the grid itself. So they made a large proposal about spending what amounts to about $1 billion to strengthen the grid over approximately 10 years. And the intention or their request has been that at least $500 million be approved today and then spent out over the next several years. That is, of course, a large commitment, and it is a long-term commitment that would, in essence, begin a process today that would play out over many years, but have no further council action that would affect it. It also had some other things that the council was looking for, but it also lacked a few things, and so I'll get to talking to those in a moment. Today, though, the council is considering 3 large projects that amount to the largest single investment in New Orleans electrical grid in history, which is about $106 million. And the reason that these 3 investments are so important and the council has chosen to focus on them is because, as the council member noted, we have been deeply concerned with making sure people can live in our city affordably. And utility costs are increasingly becoming one of the most difficult pieces of most residents' monthly budget. And utility costs are, in fact, driving people with limited or fixed incomes into significant energy poverty. And we have to do all we can to avoid making our city unaffordable, because no matter how strong the grid is, if the city is unaffordable, then there's no one here to use it. So what the council has done instead, and what the Councilmember Moreno has made clear, is that she had asked that the company and that everybody really involved take advantage of all of the massive federal opportunities brought forth by the Biden administration, including the $1 trillion Infrastructure and Reinvestment Act, the IIJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act, both massive investments in the energy transition, and both representing huge opportunities for cities like New Orleans, utilities like Entergy, to make huge transformational investments with a huge amount of federal support. And so today, we're taking advantage of about $53 million of federal money, which is a 50% match, meaning that ratepayers only have to pay 50% of this single largest investment. And in fact, that investment includes 3 projects that we'll get to in a moment that I think affect nearly everybody in New Orleans one way or another. As the councilmember noted, the transmission project having direct effect from the failures during Ida. So if we go forward here, you can see, just to drill down on what was asked of us and what we are doing today to give people some information about why the council is intending potentially to make this decision. So again, under the proposal from the company, this would have cost ratepayers, 95% of those costs would have been borne by the ratepayers under the current funding opportunities. There are no requirements for equity, which is an incredibly important piece as we make these enormous investments in New Orleans across a number of factors, whether it's energy, whether it's our roads, our bridges, are pipes underneath the ground. Equity, and that includes opportunities for local businesses and community groups to be involved in this process, both financially but also in a stakeholder capacity. Again, the company noted that this potential plan, just through the first phase, would amount to nearly a 10% rate increase, and that would be a permanent increase for residents. Again, we asked for some things from the company. They delivered a large package, and what we are considering today, though, is that what we need more of is accountability and opportunity for the public to weigh in, and more information for the public and some standards. So what we've done today is we've said, look, we're going to approve these projects that the Biden administration, the Grid Deployment Office of the Department of Energy, has already vetted, has already said these are critical projects for strengthening the grid, and also affect mainly disadvantaged communities, which is a requirement. I want to point out that under the Justice 40 requirements, which I'll get to you in a moment, this particular investment is required to deliver 40% of its benefits to disadvantaged communities. That includes businesses and community groups. And I think this is probably the gold standard in equity. And this applies across federal grants, but it is particularly important because it is federally required, and a plan had to be developed to meet these requirements, or the grant funds couldn't be distributed. Again, under this plan today, we believe that the impact to ratepayers would be less than around 1% increase to rates. It's really $1.50, I think, is what we estimate after 4 years. So it's $1.50 impact on a monthly basis with a $100 million investment. Again, going forward, we intend to build in reliability, equity, accountability, and reporting guidelines. So instead of approving something today and waiting 10 years to see if it works, or 5 years, we're going to create a system of metrics that the company would have to meet, and a cycle of public input and application that would require every, let's say, 3 years for the company and the community to get together and talk about what is right to do for the grid, what's working, and to potentially change the plan if, in fact, there are new technologies, there's new opportunities. You want to make sure that you're as flexible as possible. As we've seen over the last several years, the technology in the energy space is rapidly changing. And so what we intend is to make sure that we're as flexible and as opportunistic as we can. And again, at the very basis of everything we do is to make sure that bills are affordable going into the future. So just to highlight and summarize again, this is what we are looking at today is the largest single investment, grid investment in New Orleans history. It's $106 million. 50% of that is being paid straight by the federal government. It has that Justice 40 commitment. 40% of those benefits must flow to local businesses and community groups. We're talking about affordability, flexibility, and accountability. We want reliability standards that gauge outcomes, that protect ratepayers from just guessing about what projects will work and hoping that they work out, but rather creating metrics that can show with repeatability that investments are making a difference. We have some experience in this, and I know we've spoken to the company about this too. In 2018, the council recognized that there was an extreme number of clear day outages, and in fact ended up finding the company, but also going into a process by which it asked for a plan to fix these outages, to fix a lot of clear day outages, and start reporting on reliability and on performance. And what we've seen since that investment, since that plan, we've seen reliability actually increase. At that time, Entergy New Orleans, I believe, was in the bottom quartile of reliability of utilities across the country, and they've come all the way up almost, I think, to the average or close to above average. And that's a result of a collaboration between the council and the utility, building out a plan to make improvements and then report how those improvements worked. And so that forms a basis for what we're trying to do today. Very briefly, I did point out this Justice 40 piece. We think it's really important. It's not an option, it's a requirement to get this money, to use this money, to be in receipt of this money. You have to contractually obligate yourself to do 40% of this benefits in disadvantaged communities. That's defined by the federal government. So I think it's really important that these funds have a guarantee of investment in disadvantaged communities and in equity. pointed this out before, but I'll make a chart because people like charts, and charts are helpful. I did not do well in math in school, and this chart helps me understand. Today, what we're looking at, again, is a rate impact of $1.52 on today's vote as opposed to what was proposed. Obviously, there will be further investments, but today we wanted to point out what we're looking at for folks who are wondering what the council is hopefully saying yes to today. And then I want to give more specificity. I know Entergy is going to be able to speak at length about these projects, but the three projects we're discussing, one being this large transmission line. That's that line when you drive across the twin span to Slidell, you look to your left, there's a large transmission line that is not rated for hurricane force winds. It's not 150 mile per hour rated. That is one of the transmission lines that serves the city. It's an important one. Obviously, Grand Gulf being up to our northeast, where our major nuclear plant that serves the city. This is a line that leads in that direction. And during Ida, as the council member noted, the transmission failures were the number one reason why energy could not flow into the city. You couldn't import enough energy. You couldn't turn on the lights. The second piece, of course, is the city's very first grid-scale battery energy storage system. We have a small 0.5 megawatt battery over on Jordan Road that was developed long ago in Councilmember Green's district. That's a very small project. This project is, let me see if I can do my math right, 14 times larger by megawattage. It is a grid-scale project. It is a project that would allows our solar system, the New Orleans solar system, the power plant we built at Michoud a few years ago, to charge with clean energy a battery that can discharge for up to 4 hours, meaning that you can move some of that sunlight during the day into the evening hours and mitigate the usage of fossil fuels into the evening using this sort of energy storage system. Also, obviously, during times when we're experiencing peak usage, this battery can discharge. We can help affect some of those peak usage circumstances. The last being a major distribution grid project in the Sherwood Forest area. This would be a distribution, as the council member noted, poles and wires. And so this is a major, one of probably many to come, but one of the first large distribution rebuilds to strengthen standards that would save folks from having their lights cut out at various times because of unreliable or broken equipment. Pointed some of this out already. I'm trying to get to the end so everybody can get moving here, but we're just really focused on making sure that we're being responsible in all this work, that we're making sure that this work is accountable with a metrics-based standard, and again, that this is affordable to New Orleanians, and that's inclusive, that it has equity standards attached to it. It's really important for us that when we make these investments that we make sure we bring everyone along and we provide opportunity across our community. I know that there's another presentation, so Councilmember, obviously.
Councilmember Green?
I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned $1.50 per month for rate increase, but that doesn't kick in until 2027. So I just want our ratepayers to know that when you use that figure, immediately they might see a 20 cents.
20 cents, yes,
right.
Sir. That's right, and that's a great point, sir. I wanted to be as transparent as possible about the potentialities, but immediately a 20-cent impact is what's expected, which is, again, not nothing, but basically de minimis, less than $1. So I want to point that out. Thank you, Councilmember, for pointing that out, but that's exactly right.
And that was all.
I don't see any other questions for you all, but Entergy is up next with their presentation. Thank you all.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, all right.
Hey,
Good
Courtney, good
morning.
morning. Can you introduce yourself and your team, please?
Absolutely. I'm Courtney Nicholson, Vice President of Regulatory and Public Affairs for Entergy New Orleans. And with me, I have Brian Gilliott, Regulatory Counsel for Entergy New Orleans, as well as Mr. Ed Wicker, Regulatory Counsel for Entergy New Orleans. And he's been working, both of these guys have been working with us on our resilience plan. So we were asked to come here today. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about the GRIP project that Entergy New Orleans has planned for New Orleans East to increase resilience. It's a critical part of Operation Gridiron, which is the name that we have given our overall resilience plan. And it's a comprehensive hardening plan to build a stronger, more resilient grid across the city. So let's go to slide 2. Thank you. As you know, extreme weather events are becoming more frequent, severe, and unpredictable, and damages and costs are projected to increase. And this slide sort of depicts the storms that we have been subject to in the recent past. Over the last 50 years, 9 Category 4 and 5 hurricanes have hit the U.S. mainland, and 6 of those have been just in the past 5 years. So that just goes to show that, climate change is an issue that we are having to deal with. We were not seeing the frequency of these types of large-scale storms hit our service area, and it's something that we have to grapple with at this point. Also, customers are increasingly requiring a clean, reliable grid, which is critical to expansion and growth in the city. So it's with these thoughts in mind that we designed the GRIP project that we're here to talk about today, as well as our overall resilience plan. Let's go to slide 3. So when putting together the GRIP application and our overall resilience plan, an obvious question is, will it work? So luckily we have a perfect case study to examine that. Florida Power and Light has implemented a storm hardening plan very much like what E&O has proposed. And the results shown in this chart are outstanding. The orange bars to the left show the percent of customers restored 1 day after a hurricane hit FP&L service territory before they implemented the hardening plan. And the 2 bars on the right show restoration percentages 1 day after a hurricane hit a hardened system. In fact, Hurricane Idalia, I believe that was in 2022, it was a powerful Category 4 storm. It hit Florida, September of 2023, and FP&L was able to restore 98% of its customers after 1 day. So that was very impressive and a testament to how well their hardened system is withstanding these storms. So we do see that storm hardening of the type that we have proposed indeed works. All right, so I'm going to get into the GRIP project in a minute, but real briefly on the overall resilience plan, the council had great foresight to open this docket after Hurricane Ida and asked for parties to present resilience plans. In its filing, E&O proposed a range of viable resilience plans. The plans are meant to harden transmission and distribution structures across the city so customers across New Orleans can see real benefits. The minimum plan that we presented is $750 million investment over a 10-year period. We recommended a $1 billion plan over a 10-year period, but we're only asking for approval of the first 5 years of the plan, or whichever level of the plan that the council ultimately approves. Again, we have proposed projects in all council districts, and we want customers across New Orleans to benefit from resilience. So, in other words, we want them to have shorter outages, less damages from storms, and to keep the lights on when these storms hit. In our recommended plan, there's a huge focus to make the distribution grid more resilient. It's 70 years old. It was never designed to stand up to the stronger kinds of storms that we have been seeing more frequently. Next slide. All right, Entergy is constantly fighting for every available federal and state dollar to help offset costs to our customers. One example is the GRIP project. So the GRIP project is made up of 3 components: transmission hardening, distribution hardening, and a battery microgrid in New Orleans East. The transmission and distribution hardening are actually projects that were within the overall resilience plan or Operation Gridiron. E&O applied for federal funding for this GRIP project to offset costs for customers. We knew that this project was, it's one of nearly 700 projects that we presented in the resilience plan, but we knew this was a very attractive project from the DOE perspective, based on our own internal expertise working with the DOE, as well as the expertise of external consultants that we hired. So we knew that this project would give us the best shot if we made an application, which over hundreds of utilities were applying for these same funds, and we were successful. The Department of Energy awarded Entergy New Orleans with a $55 million grant, which will offset half of the project cost of this project to customers. So we'd like to publicly thank the Department of Energy and everyone involved in making this possible for our customers. This is going to be a great project for New Orleans East, District East specifically, and we plan to start this project in 2024. Again, it's only a first step. This one project is not going to make the whole city resilient. I want to make sure that we're clear about that much more is needed across the city. All districts need resilience. That's why we propose the overall resilience plan. The next slide, please. All right, work like the GRIP project and our overall resilience plan offers other benefits to the city beyond storm resilience. So vulnerable communities in New Orleans will benefit greatly from projects like these. These projects will stimulate the local economy, of which at least 20% of the work will go to local diverse contractors. And we see opportunities to implement our resilience plan, doing these projects across New Orleans. The goal is to keep rates low and well below the national average. We're excited to start this GRIP project, but we want to get started on the other projects in our resilience plan as well, because as I mentioned, these storms will keep coming and we want the city to be prepared. All right, thank you all for your time today, and I'll entertain any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you, Courtney. Councilmember Harris.
Hi, Courtney and Ed and Brian. How are you today?
Good.
First of all, I want to talk about the 311 system and how that's going with reporting down poles. What is the average repair? How many? Can you give me any data on how that system is going?
I don't have any specific data in terms of metrics, but I do know that we've been actively involved. We've been using the program. We're getting information, and it is proven to be a very good tool for us to communicate and have a streamlined process for customers. So I know that it's working. I don't have the exact data, but I can provide that to you. I'll present it at the next meeting.
That'd be great. And just a reminder, people can now call in to 311 or use the online tool to report down poles, leaning poles, rusted transformers, right?
That's right. So instead of the customer trying to figure out whose pole it is, because we have poles from multiple utilities, AT&T has poles, we have poles, Cox has poles, we all have structures, and oftentimes that's the issue. You see a leaning pole in front of your house or somewhere, and you don't know whose it is. So instead of trying to contact all of us, contact your council member, figure it out, you can just call 311, and it will disperse amongst us, and we'll figure it out.
Great. No, and I appreciate that and appreciate the work that you all did on that. Now, let me just turn to something that's less positive. This morning, I received about 10 pictures from a constituent that had leaning poles that are leaning more than 5 degrees, rusted transformers, so the things that you see hanging by the poles. I can get you specific addresses. I also got a call this morning about 4209 and 4210 Magnolia, where there are some cross arms that are deteriorating, and the constituent is hearing sparking, which is concerning. And we have made a 311 complaint, and we've contacted our contact at Entergy. My question is this, and I've asked this before. What database do you all keep on the age of the transformers, poles, when you check them, repairs that have been done? Do you keep that information comprehensively?
We do. Again, the equipment is, it's, as a general matter, as I mentioned, our distribution system is 70 years old. That doesn't mean that every piece of equipment out there is 70 years old, so it varies, but we do keep track of each piece of equipment. It's sometimes difficult to get that information quickly. I know a lot of times you guys ask us for that information, so we have to do some work to pull and extrapolate that information, but we do keep it.
And you have somebody at Entergy who checks, for example, this transformer was installed in 1940, and it has been repaired in 1950, 1970, whatever.
That's right.
Okay, and that's information I think I asked before for you all to share, but there was something about security and you don't want to share with us, is that right?
Let me get back to you. There is levels of information that we can provide, and it's just the format in which we do that. To make sure
It
that-
would be helpful to me to know sort of the age of poles and even if it's average age in my particular district and particular neighborhoods, especially as you're talking about protecting vulnerable neighborhoods. So for example, I don't know if in Gerttown the poles were installed in 1940 versus the Lower Garden District and they were installed in 1970. So just to have sort of an average age
That's
so
right.
we know who is more vulnerable and more apt to have an outage based on the local poles and the leaning poles, I think that would be helpful. The other thing that you've said is that the average age of the infrastructure is about 70 years old. Is that right?
That's correct.
What is the average age of other cities around us, like Jefferson, Parrish, St. Tammany? I would assume that it's younger because the younger
Yeah.
communities.
That's what I was going to say. I would assume, in many instances where you get out into more suburban areas that it's younger. I can't say I can provide that information. We can try to dig as best as we can and find that out. But as a general matter, I mean, New Orleans is an older city, and we have
old
further
poles.
on the path, of infrastructure.
And I guess to round out the question, so, and I've asked this before, what is the plan? I know you inspect poles, I think, what is it, every 10 years? And I've been out there with you guys. I've seen the guys and women who actually work on the poles, and I've seen a pole installed. It's really amazing. But what is the plan for upgrading this particular local infrastructure? I get sustaining the grid on a large scale basis, but a lot of the outages happen on a local basis.
That's right. And that's, actually part of what we're presenting in Operation Gridiron. So we are, the GRIP project is an excellent project. It's a transmission project that will benefit lots of customers in the east and further out into other neighborhoods. But really, what we have found, in order to have the type of resilience and reliability that we need, you have to touch the distribution system. That's exactly what you're talking about. Poles that transmit power to people's homes, the wooden poles that we see, that is where, in New Orleans specifically, these storms hit, these old infrastructures, and even other types of weather, like the cold snap that we had 2 weeks ago, these tornadoes that we're seeing out the blue. It's just all sorts of, the heat even, all sorts of weather events and abnormalities that we are trying to grapple with, especially with the distribution system. So our plan for Operation Gridiron, it's nearly 700 distribution projects. It would be projects in every single neighborhood. Every community would see benefits of resilience, and things like poles would be upgraded. We're looking for opportunities where possible to change from wooden poles to composite poles, also to underground where it's possible. And when I say where possible, we undertook the analysis to make sure that every single project that we presented to you all met a cost-benefit test. So in other words, these things are costly, right? So in other words, we're not just replacing poles because they're ugly. We're looking for the poles that really matter and making sure that the investments that we're making will have dividends for customers in terms of resilience and reliability.
Yeah, 2 final points. I'm sad that Mr. Burnside isn't here. He's showed me the termite-eaten poles, and you all have received those photos, and I believe that most of those have been changed out.
Yes.
The other thing, to your point about minor incidents, I think it was, like you said, 2 weeks ago during the cold and the wind, we get reports of flickering lights, and this is not because of the main grid, it's because of the local infrastructure.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Green,
And we will get
followed by Morrell.
information from you on those polls.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for your presentation. I have a question with regards to the GRIP project's goal relative to the use of local and diverse firms. Could you explain to the public what the intent is? Also, I'd like you to explain the numbers, because many people who deal with the city of New Orleans recognize that we have a 35% DBE requirement relative to the jobs that we do and that we let. But if you could talk about how you arrived at that number and just generally the plans to involve local and diverse contractors.
Yes, so we actually had on last Monday a contracting fair out at Dillard University where we encourage minority and all suppliers local, but particularly minority firms to come and bid on projects related to Operation Gridiron. So we're looking for everything from hydro excavation services, surveying work, restoration services, the whole gamut, to help support that work. We actually have in the audience one of our partners from United Utility who will be overseeing the work and ensuring that a good percentage, I believe 25% or 35% at least, will go to diverse firms. And we want as much of this work as possible to stay with local businesses as well. And then did that answer?
Well, how'd you arrive at 20% versus, you kind of drew out a couple of numbers now, versus 20, well, where'd the number 20% come from?
That's right. That's what our internal supplier diversity standards are. So we wanted to make sure that that was part of our partnership with United Utility, that we transferred that to them as well. And I understand that the city has a higher, I believe it's 35%, a higher standard as well. So look, that's the minimum. We want to make sure that at least that number is hit by and served by minority firms, and the more the better. That is supplier diversity is a big priority for Entergy, and we've communicated that to our partners at United Utility as well.
Yes, I trust that you have the desire to want to achieve that. It's just when members of the public see a goal, sometimes the goal isn't achieved, and then if it's already at 20%, they assume that it's going to be lower than that. Hopefully it can be higher than that because of the need. I was concerned, and you used the term local and diverse versus like certified DBE. I don't know what diverse means sometimes, you know.
No, we're looking, that's right. We're looking for, and I'm sorry if I'm using too much general talk, but yes, we're looking for certified DBEs as well. And certainly our goal is to do everything that we can to make sure that we are making local companies aware of what opportunities there are, like the contracting fair that we had at Dillard. And we'll keep doing that so we can do our part to make sure that those opportunities get to the right local companies.
I appreciate you doing the contract affair too. Can I ask you to just explain to the public, if they're a DBE firm, how they might get involved with this project?
Yes.
Sharing the name of the point person, maybe.
Yes, I think the best route, and I'll have the gentleman from United Utility offer himself and offer his information, but I think the best route will be to reach out to United Utility, so they will be the entity that is, should these projects be approved by the council, overseeing all the work, and we're looking for subcontractors to do a host of work. We can certainly, reach out to Entergy as well, and we'll have more informational fairs, things like that, so that people know who to contact, what type of work there is, what schedules we're on, and what to expect next. So I think now, time is of the essence. We're having, folks are waiting to see what the council's going to do in terms of approving the plan so that they can know how much work is out there.
Well, one of the ways they get enthusiastic about it is when you say that you're going to be able to help the economy, especially those who haven't participated in these projects before. And that's why I asked something very specific relative to who. And for example, you mentioned United Technologies. Let's share that information so that everybody knows.
That's right.
Because they do have an influence in the community in terms of the business community.
That's right. We actually have a webpage for Operation Gridiron. I'll make sure that we update that so that information is publicly available. I'm not sure if it's publicly accessible so people know who to contact. So the contracting fair that we had was one of the first that we've done on this project, so we'll make sure that that information is out there. And again, I can't emphasize enough, because people, when we first talked about having that contracting fair, people were like, oh, you need people to build your grid, and it's so much work out there, so many varieties, OSHA compliance. I could go on and on about the subcontractors that we need. So again, there is a lot of work going around, and I think this will go a long way to stimulate the local economy as well.
Okay,
for
just
many years.
Be very deliberate in your sharing of information. Share it with us, because we reach out to a lot of people through various means.
Yeah, we'll share that with you all as well. That's
okay.
A good idea.
And Councilman, I just wanted to emphasize that the council today are approving 3 projects, but hopefully the council will approve. We proposed over 600 projects spread around the city. So hopefully over time, the council will approve many more of those projects, and we'll have the dual effect of, number one, making the city more resilient, but then also creating more economic opportunities for diverse contractors.
Okay, thank you for mentioning that.
And then on the issue of more information, Councilmember Green, I think you bring up a really good point, particularly for this set of projects that we're approving today, because they do have federal grants attached to them, which have the Justice 40 requirements, which include in those requirements advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I think it would be beneficial to the council to be sent a report as to why these particular projects can't go well above 25% DBE participation, particularly since they do have to follow Justice 40 requirements as well. I think that report, Councilmember Green, would be important for us to review.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and Council President. I guess to start, I know you highlighted in the beginning of your plan Louisiana versus Florida.
Yes.
And I think it's important for us to really draw some distinctions. The first is the median income in Florida is about $68,000. The median income in Louisiana is $55,000. There are 22 million people in Florida, and there are 4.6 million people in Louisiana. So when you talk about the cost of grid hardening and how it's spread across a population of users, Florida has more money and more people.
Absolutely.
So you're nodding now, but I don't think you'll be nodding in a second. The issue is that to present that if we were to lay down $1 billion of New Orleans ratepayer money, that we could be comparable to Florida with very little impact on the pocketbook, I'm going to be candid, I feel like it's very disingenuous. I will tell you that, I guess my first question is, who paid for Operation Gridiron? And I mean the advertising campaign for Operation Gridiron.
Entergy.
Entergy, which Entergy?
All of the operating companies, with the exception of some of them that are not Arkansas, are benefiting from Operation Gridiron. We all have resilience plans.
So the advertising locally for Operation Gridiron was paid for by the Entergy parent corporation.
We have, that's a loaded question because we have a advertisement across the state. So it depends, but yes, there's some that's funded specifically for New Orleans, but yes, Entergy.
Well, I mean, particularly the outreach,
communication.
the outreach that was made to our constituents would pass through calls and emails to the council. Who paid for that?
That's a loaded question. There are a number of entities that are submitting, making appeals to the council.
Well,
but in terms of billboards that you see, we have a corporate communications department. And
I appreciate the loaded question comments, because I think that really sets the table for where this conversation needs to be about. There seems to be a disconnect between the Operation Gridiron proposal and what Council President Moreno proposed. And I think the reality is there's this idea, and I've followed the campaign, I say campaign because it's more like a political campaign very closely, that it's like, hey, if you call your council people, you can have a hardened grid. That's Gridiron, that's the proposal. And I mean, and the emphasis is always on, well, this is going to cost you very little. And I think that there is a lot, to your point, I think that that is I don't want to go as far as saying deceptive marketing, but I think it knocks on the door. And I say that because the people of the city, the reason why I think the council has so much skepticism about Operation Gridiron is that when you look at the two most expensive taxpayer-funded Entergy New Orleans projects, and by those I mean Grand Gulf, and I mean the gas plant in New Orleans East, the people of the city have made tremendous overtures to provide resources through ratepayer dollars to do things like invest in nuclear energy, invest in a gas plant, and both have not panned out as they thought it should. And the skepticism that this council has on writing a check for $500 million, $750 million, $1 billion under the pretense that this entire project will do what you say it does with no metrics in real time to say that we actually will see the savings or see the resiliency, I think that there's been a non-transparent discussion as to why this council is skeptical and why I believe that the proposal that we're seeing today is more of a trust but verify. I think that if we can see these current proposals that are partially funded with federal money that meet all of the requirements that you purport to say you're going to do, diversity, inclusion, actual return, actual resiliency, I think that would put the council in a position and the public in a position to say, what's the next project? I guess for me, coming from the state legislature, when we do capital outlay projects, we do them one at a time. And though I understand that is more expensive as far as the economy of scale, we're able to see that was that project successful before we give the next chunk of money. And I think really what needs to be addressed, and I'd love for you to comment on it, is Operation Gridiron is really proposed to the public, and I'm sure Jesse will illuminate us on some degree, but as this altruistic endeavor. That's not 100% true because Entergy will profit off of infrastructure investment, correct?
Entergy profits off of any investments that it makes, but I mean, this is a proposal that we have put together at the request of the council to benefit customers. Everything that we have presented in the plan, every single project, we've gone through lengths to make sure that the cost of those projects the benefits of those projects are outweighed by the cost. So they made a cost-benefit test. We're not proposing something to enrich ourselves. This is truly what we recommend and believe that the city needs to make it more resilient and to withstand the storms that we're seeing.
Well, I think to Councilman Harris's point, it is very cheap. It is cheaper to replace a pole than for a transformer to fall off a pole and explode. However, it is more profitable to replace the exploding transformer and sell it to the city versus replacing the pole, which is correct.
But that's not how we plan our
I'm asking you, as far as the business model is concerned, maintenance is not as profitable as replacement.
That's fair because maintenance doesn't have a return component on it.
Right. So part of what the skepticism we get from our constituents, because when I get these calls and these emails about Operation Gridiron about how, why would you oppose spending $750 million to harden our grid for pennies on the dollar? It's not pennies on the dollar. That is, it's not
pennies on the dollar.
It's not pennies on the dollar, and more importantly, much like when you look at our gas plant, much like when you look at, I mean, we're in litigation right now, which I won't get into in this meeting, next meeting, on Grand Gulf, but the city and the citizens of the city have made tremendous investments at the behest of Entergy for very specific returns. We were supposed to get cheap, reliable nuclear energy from a plant that's gone down numerous times in the last 2 years. We were told, and the former CEO of Energy New Orleans sat at this table with the AstroTurf crowd saying that we needed a gas plant in New Orleans East because it'll be that reliable power when a hurricane knocks out your power. Ida happened and
it performed as it should have. It helped us get the lights back on much faster than we would have.
I would beg to differ that what was sold to the public during that process was not, it would make it easier for crews to get the power up. It was, they'll flip a switch and your lights will be on. As someone, and as many people in this room who sat through Ida and sat in the dark and sat in everything else, that it might have performed as Entergy expected. It did not perform as it was sold to the public.
As people understood that it would have. Well, I mean, that plant was critical in our ability to get lights back on as quickly as we were after Hurricane Ida, which was catastrophic. But a couple things you said that I think are really important because I understand the tension here and the type of feedback you all are getting, and maybe that there's some skepticism. To get to the cost point, this is not free. This is not cheap. I don't want to suggest that $1 billion investment for a city like New Orleans with the low-income population that we have and the challenges that we have economically would be something that customers don't notice. Certainly, people will see, these bill effects. The point is that this plan that we have presented is cheaper for customers than the alternative, which is dealing with storms as they come, dealing with repairs as they come. But yes, when you get to year 5, we're looking at a $11 bill impact at the recommended plan. That's not inexpensive. We recognize that. So we're doing everything that we can. The 2 ways that we have tried to make that bill effect as reasonable as we can, I'd use the words reasonable as opposed to, pennies on the dollar, is by spreading the plan out over a 10-year period and seeking federal funding as much as
Well, I guess it's also important that what people need to understand is once we agree to a plan and we agree to a cost, who is responsible if a project runs over budget? Who has to foot that bill?
It would be ratepayers, and that's fair because the projects that we have presented are a class 3 estimate. These are projects that are starting years away, so there could be instances where the costs are different than what we presented. So I agree with you that we want to make sure that the council is informed along the way, that there's accountability, that we're making that known when there are cost overages and giving the council an opportunity to say, hey, no, stop this project or let's reimagine it.
But if we sell the public on this $750 million, billion-dollar resiliency plan, if ratepayers' money has been invested halfway into a project and it has significant crossover runs, and I know it's not simple for the council to say, well, ratepayers, we've already been charging you for 10 years to build this resilient grid. Mm-hmm. The grid is now running tremendously over budget. We're now increasing your rates. And the number you were sold when you were enthusiastically calling us to support Operation Gridiron, when suddenly that $11 is $20,
Right.
is $30, is $50.
Doesn't get that bad, $11.
But the point is that from my understanding, and I've only been on the council for 2 years, Council President Moreno used to chair the committee I now chair, cost overruns in the utility community for infrastructure investment are not the exception, they're the norm.
Well, not for us, though. I mean, we're pretty good at hitting our budget. When we propose a number, we 99% of the time hit that number. Now, macroeconomic environment being what it is, I take your point.
That's right.
We've built in checkpoints into Operation Gridiron to where we would inform the council really every year of the cost that we expect of each of these, because it's 600 projects, not like it's one project. So there'll be multiple opportunities built into the plan that we proposed in order to keep the council abreast of the cost, any overruns, anything like that. You'll have an opportunity to weigh in and say, stop that project, don't go forward.
But I appreciate you're saying that we have a ripcord we can pull, but part of my issue, generally speaking, with the Operation Gridiron proposal is that, and I guess I'm speaking from a purely legal standpoint, part of Operation Gridiron, as I see it, is a contract. We are saying we are contracting with you as a utility to build these things, okay? My concern, and I've had this conversation candidly with people at this table, it's not just about the money, it's about the obligation the city and the ratepayers are putting themselves in to pay for the completion of the project. It does not help us that if you cannot manage cost or if things don't meet certain criteria, we're on the hook to finish those projects. I think that from my perspective, what I find attractive about what Council President Moreno is proposing is, though it might be more expensive in the long run, I would sooner find specific projects, vet those projects in a public forum, see what the return's going to be, have a conversation, pay for those projects, and move forward on a project-by-project basis, or even small groups where we know if we're pulling a ripcord, it's on, I don't know, $10, $15 million, not on $250 million.
I think the issue,
Go ahead.
now, one of the, and that's a fair point. I think it's taken us 2 years to get to since Ida. We had a procedural schedule where we've had numerous opportunities to touch bases with the community, numerous opportunities to talk to the advisors, talk to the council about Operation Gridiron. Now we're 2 years past Ida. And, when we talk about the cost and that, hey, we all have to acknowledge it's a pretty significant cost. But when I look at, what the council just approved for Hurricane Ida, that was $150 million. The storm before that was $70 million, and it was only a tropical storm. And so when you look at what we do following a storm, when we go out and repair, we just repair. We return it back to the status quo. So if one pole goes down, we replace one pole. And we get, because the motive is to get the power back to customers on as soon as possible. Now, that's not thinking about resilience in a very comprehensive way, and it's costing customers a pretty significant amount to do that. So the council's asked us to be proactive and propose a comprehensive plan that eliminates that seesaw, that cyclical thing that we have to do after a storm that does not really make New Orleans more resilient, but it costs customers money in the long run, much more money. And so we proposed a plan that, eliminates that. And yes, it has a cost, but again, this plan will cost customers much less in the long run than responding to
very important
after
points.
storm.
The first is, I think what frustrates customers is that everybody in here can point to a pole or infrastructure damage that happens during a hurricane or tropical storm where you see aging, non-maintained infrastructure that collapses. It would be one thing if we were talking about we have a perfectly maintained system that fails completely due to the fact that it is not resilient. What we have in front of us is a non-maintained system that we're introducing reinforcement to. I think it would be a much easier sale to myself and to my constituents that if you didn't drive through New Orleans seeing poles leaning, existing poles, at 30, 40, 50, 90-degree angles, if all the poles were straight and we just needed new poles because of climate change, I think people would say, sign me up for that. But when you don't see maintenance happening, the question becomes, and I cannot de-emphasize this, it bothers me how the messaging in Operation Gridiron has been, we are your partner who has proposed this altruistic solution to the problem that vexes the citizens of New Orleans with resiliency, when part of the issue we cannot discount when it comes to spending large amounts of money with utility companies in a regulatory structure is that there is also tremendous profit to be made for large infrastructure investments. It is more profitable for utilities to build things than to maintain them. I mean, everyone knows of the infamous hook in California where there was a 98-year-old hook that was not replaced by, was it P&G? Correct, P&G. Didn't replace a hook that was 98 years old, and it burned down and caused hundreds of millions of dollars damage and killed dozens of people because it didn't do maintenance. My point being, I'm not saying y'all murder people
We will not find ourselves in that situation.
I know, but what I'm saying is, the reality is that there is, and I mean, I guess because as a politician, I know a political campaign when I see it. Gridiron is a political campaign to convince people to support a infrastructure investment that will harden the grid, but will also generate tremendous profits. And I think that discounting the latter and pushing the former is disingenuous. I think as a council, as a regulatory body, we have to balance the interest of making sure that whatever we agree to fund, based upon history, because like I said, we are currently in litigation over Grand Gulf. We and E&O is still dealing with the repercussions of how we got to a gas plant in New Orleans East. We have to be above board, we have to be transparent, and as we invest in things to harden our grid, we have to all be comfortable that when we're charging ratepayers to do infrastructure investment, it's going to be successful. It's going to meet all the standards we set, both for DB participation and also just for having measurable metrics we can see in the short term to show that it did harden the grid and it built public confidence, and then we expand from that. That's where we are, I believe, to get legitimate public support for infrastructure investment, but more importantly, to rebuild trust between the public and the city and our utility, because it has deteriorated since, before IDA, I'd say since the gas plant in New Orleans East, the paid actor scandal. We're all trying to collectively get to a better place. I just don't believe, as a council person, I'm at a place right now where I could support obligating ratepayers for a minimum of $500, $750 to $1 billion, knowing that what I know nationally with overruns and with other expenditures, even with that balloon payment 5 years out, I don't want ratepayers seeing another number on their bill that starts at $5, $10, and now it's $50. And then they're looking back 10 years from now and going, my power's still going out, the grid's still falling down, poles are still falling down, and now I'm paying $50 more on my utility bill? I won't be here. I can't be here. Hopefully I'm not here. But I don't want a future council and a future ratepayers saddled with that burden if we're not absolutely sure we're going to have the return to defend it. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Council Vice Chair. Real quick, I just wanted to add a couple things that the Council Vice President discussed. Real quick on just the Gridiron campaign, because we did get many emails from constituents who were upset that they were getting text messages and emails and things like that. And so, I think it is problematic if you're sharing customer information to folks who are looking to, campaign around this particular issue. I don't know if you did or not. Is that what occurred?
No.
Okay, so you use, I guess, a campaign consultant or something like that, or how does that work?
It's hard to say. There are a lot of entities out there that are interested in this program. There have been some independent entities that are sponsored by entities like EEI. It's all over in terms of what you're talking about.
Don't get the Councilmember Morel started on Edison.
But I don't know. We don't have time
for that today.
But in terms of sharing customer information, we do not do that. We can't even text message customers who have not opted in to receive text messages. So that is not something that has transpired here.
So, and just so everyone is clear, I was the one who initiated the resilience docket after Hurricane Ida. And, I certainly thought it was important to come up with the different projects to make our grid stronger. We do need a stronger grid in the city of New Orleans. And, I heard you talk about, Brian, about the different storms and the cost of the storms. And I think that overall, the public really felt that after Hurricane Katrina, there would be investments being made within the city by Entergy New Orleans to make us safer. I remember back then, I was still a member of the media, and there were conversations about, putting the lines underground and all of these different plans to be able to be stronger for a future storm. But I think what the public saw is that these major investments never happened, and then therefore we still kept getting pummeled by each of these storms. And that's why I ordered the docket after Hurricane Ida. And no doubt about it, many of these projects that are part of the overall large-scale solution that, phase one and phase two, whether it's $750 million or whether it's $1 billion, these are really important projects. They really are. And at the end of the day, though, we do have to move forward with these projects carefully. And to Council Vice President Morel's point, my concern was just turning over and approving all these projects, even if it's just phase one at just over $500 million, and saying, okay, we're going to do all these, but not being able to assess whether or not that they're the right projects at the right time, not being able to have standards to ensure that they're meeting reliability and resilience standards, and resilience standards we're likely going to have to create in an upcoming docket, and then, not having enough additional funding outside of ratepayers to be able to cover the costs. And there are a variety of different opportunities to do that. I mean, I know there was a FERC order where they're saying that you all owe us $180 million worth of refunds at this point. I know that you all disagree. But, I mean, that's a huge opportunity right there for funding. There's more federal grants that are available. I think we have, potentially could keep biting at the apple for federal grants at potentially up to $300 million, which is major. So by proceeding with caution, yet still moving forward, I think not only is it beneficial to, of course, the people of New Orleans, who already have so many cost of living expenses, it's actually beneficial to the company. It's beneficial to the company because this will allow you all to regain the trust of the community and to work with this city council, not against, but together. Because I do think that at the end of the day that these projects are important. And to Councilmember Harris's point, I don't think there's anyone in the city who is more in tune with what is happening with poles that are leaning or falling down in their district than Councilmember Harris. She literally walks through through streets and neighborhoods where these situations are happening, takes pictures, sends them to you. She also has Michael Burnside, who's pretty much now a volunteer in your office, who helps her with this as well. And so we all have a very clear understanding of the enhancements that are necessary, but we can't just say, okay, let's approve, $500 million to $750 million worth of potential ratepayer impacts, all solely on the backs of ratepayers, and say Entergy go at it without any real accountability, metrics, check-ins built around that.
And I can't emphasize this enough. We agree with you. We want to see this happen. What we have presented to the council is what we recommend and believe is needed for the city to be resilient. We want to work with you on more accountability, on metrics to make sure that the projects that we're implementing are working. We are not opposed to any of that. We've simply proposed, we've already proposed some accountability measures in our plan, but that was just a start to start the conversation. And we are happy to work with you all to make sure that everyone is comfortable, that there's enough accountability in place in our plan. And we're ready to get to work. Time is of the essence. I know you agree as well. These projects are important. As Brian mentioned, we started this conversation after Ida. We are now approaching, the 2024 storm season is upon us. And we just want to make sure that we're all positioned to get to work, to start to...
And to be clear, nothing would be able to be built by the 2024
Nothing would be able to be
season.
built,
Right.
but we want to go into it with some certainty and start planning, start making these investments. Certainly by 2025, our plan was to have boots on the ground and starting construction of a number of projects. So we just want to make sure that we're positioned and working with you in an expedient manner to start to see some of these benefits.
And if I could add, Councilmember, because I'm really passionate about this because I worked on a storm hardening docket before you were on the council. So, many, many councils ago, and we approved at that time, and this was before all of these major storms started rolling in, and we approved $30 million. And so, we undertook that project. We hardened the grid $30 million worth. And then now when I look back, that wasn't nearly enough. And so I just don't want to be in a position where 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we look back and we say, yeah, that wasn't enough. And so everything that Courtney said is true. We're willing to work with you. We do want to work with you to get to that sweet spot, figure out what standards are appropriate, et cetera. But I just thought I would add that for context and color.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying, Brian, and it would have been great if you would have had those, since Hurricane Katrina, maybe every year, another 30 million here and there and there and there, and we would have been much stronger now, instead of having to try to figure it all out immediately, right after Hurricane Ida. Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, just quickly so I don't beat a dead horse, but Brian, again, the comprehensive plan and accountability and having matrix, I've said this since I got on council, checking a pole and checking these transformers every 10 years seems to me like it's not enough. Courtney, I just shot you a picture of a rusty transformer that I can tell you has been rusted since before Ida. So this is not like stuff that just happened after Ida. This is deferred maintenance that y'all need to take care of. And my question is it not in your budget to maintain these poles, these transformers, these local lines that actually provide energy every day to constituents.
So if I could just respond to that, yes, we have a plan, and it's a very robust maintenance plan. What you're talking about, I think, in terms of the 10-year cycle, is a cycle where we go in, we try to replace and inspect to make replacements to every feeder in the city on a 10-year cycle. So that's more of a.
Let me interrupt you there. That's different information than what we've gotten before, which is we put our eyes on a pole once every 10 years. That literally has been said in this chamber. We look at poles and transformers once every 10 years. So if that's different information, or maybe I'm hearing different information today.
Well, I'm just saying we have maybe 4 different reliability categories, 4 different maintenance programs. There's one program that goes around and puts their eyes on a pole every 10 years. There's another program that's called like Fix It Now, or that there's a reactive and a proactive component to maintenance. And so if somebody identifies a pole, we do have a team that will go out and replace that pole immediately, not in 10 years. And that's on a shorter cycle. I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, I mean, I just think your cycle should be shorter than let's put our eyes on every 10 years. And what I would encourage the public listening today is to, as you're driving, as you're walking, look up in the sky, look at the poles that are leaning, look at the rusted transformers, take a photo, and send that to 311 so that we can get it over to Entergy, because that, it seems, is the only way that we're going to get these things changed out on a timely basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Let me go ahead and take public comment. Jesse George? Come on up, Jesse, followed by Myron Katz. Everybody gets 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jesse.
Good morning. I'd also like to know how this front group for the Edison Electric Institute, We Stand for Energy, got everyone's phone numbers, because I also received one of those text messages. And I find it very hard to believe that this group is spending advertising money purely out of the kindness of their hearts. I think there must be some coordination with Entergy involved there, and it certainly is in line with Entergy tactics, which is when you can't build public support for something, just fake it. I think it's right that people are questioning where this money is coming from and how it's being spent. It's really disingenuous to have Entergy folks sit up here and say that, when a storm comes, we just have to repair things to the way they were before, because we all know, as the questions around maintenance this morning have pointed out, it's not just a one-for-one thing. This is infrastructure that has been allowed to decay and depreciate over many, many years of neglect. And we know this for a fact because, as I've pointed out repeatedly to this body, Entergy makes no attempt to hide this fact. They brag every quarter to their shareholders that they are deferring maintenance spending to increase shareholder payouts. Go back and look at their shareholder presentations from each quarter. You will see this in plain sight. So I appreciate the focus on cost impacts and mitigating those impacts on ratepayers. Ultimately, these projects are beneficial. We appreciate the focus on New Orleans East, on hardening transmission and adding battery storage to the New Orleans Solar Station. We appreciate the council adding more specific reporting requirements into this resolution because we need to ensure that these investments are resulting in real resilience benefits. We look forward to continuing to participate in this docket to develop a more robust accounting procedure and metrics and evaluations for these projects going forward. And we thank you, the council, for working to mitigate ratepayer impact.
Thank you, Jesse. Myron Katz, followed by Casey DeMoss.
Okay. First of all, I want to mention that I'm wearing a Jewish yarmulke on purpose to identify as a Jew because the world has too much anti-Semitism, and I'm not the only Jew in the room, but I am the only Jew wearing a yarmulke, and it's important to know that I'm here to solve equity and safety and reliability and resilience issues for this city and the whole world with no expect remuneration, and I consider that part of my religious obligation as a Jew. Secondly, I want to point out I'm the only person in the room who was here to fight against NOPS, the New Orleans Power Station, and here to fight against Grand Gulf in the 1980s. Those two boondoggles were forced through by a relatively poorly informed council, and I'm trying to help you solve these problems. And you did not just spend $30 million in the last decade on resilience, because you have discounted the $80 million you put in on smart meters. And smart meters have the ability to recognize poorly operating transformers and other defects in the wires. And they're supposed to tell the utility in advance where there's a defect without having to go look at it. And these electronic defects are all over the system, and the smart meters tell them. But the most important thing I came here to talk about is I'm in favor of this resolution, but you got there through a flawed process. And let me give you a short list of the flaws. First of all, ProRate was the first intervener, besides the city, first intervener to join, the first intervener ready to present a proposal to solutions where the utility said, we want 3 months more time. We were ready on day one, which was March 1st. And we proposed a rate design, but not just a rate design, also a battery pilot. And a battery pilot, as I understand it now, was highly successful. And battery pilots provide resilience and reliability in homes, whether or not they have solar, and it's been proven. And the Alliance for Affordable Energy and the other organizations point out that the resilience docket and the
Mr. Katz, that's your time. Thank you.
I want to know that. You did not stop the Alliance for Affordability for 5 minutes. I mean, for 2 minutes.
He didn't go for 5 minutes. As soon as I caught it, and as soon as I caught this one, yeah, I let you go a little bit longer. Thank you, Mr. Katz.
I should be
Appreciate it.
listed on the list of community organizations that are having these meetings. We did not resign from this docket. We were encouraged to join another docket. We did not join the other docket. We should be invited to all of these technical conferences. We should be. We're not. And if you did...
Mr. Katz, I'll have you get with Aaron on getting you notified for all of
You
those.
shouldn't be paying for any of this. This all should be paid for out of discounted utility rates.
Thank you. Casey DeMoss, followed by Gregory Manning. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Casey DeMoss. I'm the Executive Director of Resilience New Orleans. We're a new nonprofit here in New Orleans, and I'm a local resident. Infrastructure investment in New Orleans is needed. The resolution today is a delay for resiliency and reliability and a repeat of past regulatory missteps. The resolution is misleading people into thinking we are doing resiliency when in reality, we're just doing a stopgap measure. Your Chief of Staff, Andrew, said, no matter how strong the grid is, the city must be affordable. But this is backwards. Vulnerable communities will continue to suffer economically from outages, food loss, excessive healthcare costs for energy-dependent people, job loss, and worse economic outcomes. Without a strong, reliable grid, the city cannot attract new business or investment dollars to increase our tax base. And waiting for grants cannot cover the total cost. We all own the grid, and we all contribute to its function. We need it to be strong because we depend on electricity for absolutely everything: water, communications, internet, food security, and our dependence is only growing. Electric vehicles, and we're trying to move off gas appliances. As regulators, your responsibility is keeping costs affordable, but not at the expense of reliability. Resiliency is a necessary investment. Ask the question, how do you want the grid to look in 10 years? We have an excellent 10-year plan in front of us that will strengthen our local distribution system. And a study my organization conducted shows that the greatest beneficiaries of Entergy's resiliency plan are low-income, the sick, energy insecure. The vulnerable communities need distribution hardening, not incremental improvements. We all understand no one wants higher electric bills.
Ms. DeMoss, that's your time. Thank you. Gregory Manning, followed by Aaron Hansen. Thank you.
Good morning, council members.
Good morning.
Pastor Gregory Manning, pastor Broadmoor Community Church, also a member of Together New Orleans, and also chair and founder of the Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition. So we got involved in this storm hardening and resiliency docket for really one chief reason, and that reason is that distributive solar and also the fact that we would have battery storage would be a part of this resilience strategy. So all of us know that that's happened mainly through the implementation of the Community Lighthouse Project and implementation of projects like Get Lit, Stay Lit. They've created resiliency hubs throughout our community, and that needs to happen. However, grassroots organizations can't just do that themselves. That has to continue to be a part of this conversation and a part of this docket. We have to, as a council and we as a community, have to see the value of distributive solar and also resiliency hubs throughout our community. We have to see that helps people. When we talk about the cost of everything, we have to also consider the cost of human lives. So when the power goes out and we know that the grid will fail, people die. People go to the hospital. People have trauma that goes on. Mental strain and stress upon people is a cost that we have to calculate into this as well, too. And so when there is no robust consideration of the value of resiliency hubs, then the conversation is not yet over. And so you all have been very supportive of the work of TNO, and we want to say that we support this resolution, but at the same time, we are very much looking forward to more conversation about the impact and value of resiliency hubs and resources, mainly distributive solar and storage and battery storage within our community. Thank you.
Thank you, and happy to have that conversation too. Erin Hansen, followed by Evelyn Turner.
Good morning, Council. My name is Erin Hansen with Together Louisiana. I just want to elaborate on what Reverend Manning has said. One thing that we recognized early on in the development of the Community Lighthouse Project is that these systems with solar panels and backup batteries don't just serve a benefit to the institution that they're on. They serve a benefit to the community around them, and they serve a benefit to the broader grid. So we realized we need to be able to articulate that benefit. And so we have worked with an outside consultant to quantify the grid benefit of, in particular, the distributed energy storage system, so the battery system that's part of each community lighthouse, to say, what is the resiliency benefit of the battery? What is the energy benefit of the battery? And then what are the avoided costs of those systems? And created essentially a value stack that says this is the grid benefit of batteries. And so we support the resolution as a start towards grid reliability. And we see a lot of room for improvement on resiliency, which is what is the impact when the power goes out. We know that all these investments will help prevent that, but we know that the power is still going to go out, right? And so what happens when it does? And what we would suggest is that the city develop a comprehensive resilience plan with metrics that can be met, and that distributed energy generation and storage is a part of that plan. And so we would love to meet with you to show you those numbers and make that case.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I absolutely would love to get together on that. Evelyn Turner, followed by Dan Mills. Hey, Ms. Turner.
Good afternoon. I'm Evelyn Turner. I am a member of Together New Orleans, but I'm also here as a ratepayer and someone who has been adversely affected by the outages and the grid going down. I appreciate the hardening will reduce the number of outages. That's a good thing. But when Ida occurred, I evacuated to Mississippi. And Energy provided a useful tool, a map that showed when power was being restored. That map indicated that power was restored in my neighborhood. So I returned from Mississippi to New Orleans, only to find that power was stored in some area, some parts of my neighborhood, but not at my house. I was there an additional day without power, and in fact, tracked down a truck, directed him to my house in order to eventually get my power restored. My point is this, that having resiliency hubs in my community would have been a great benefit to me. And I don't think the hardening plan is complete without other additional resources, such as community lighthouses. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dan Mills, followed by Monique Harden.
Good morning. My name is Dan Mills, lifelong resident of Algiers, today representing the Home Builders Association of Greater New Orleans. I'm here to report that the Board of Directors for the Home Builders Association reviewed this plan, and it's the only plan that we've seen that would provide resiliency over the 10-year period from today, also recognizing the increasing demands on the electrical grid that will be replaced, that will be added to that grid as we increase electric vehicles and other requirements moving forward. As mentioned earlier, the reliance on the electrical grid is absolutely critical, and when power is out, it doesn't just shut down what's going on. It stops businesses from happening, it keeps people out of their homes, and it increases insurance damages in the home because we have humidity and we get mildew and damages inside the home. One of the highest things impacting affordability in New Orleans right now is insurance rates, and 90% of the insurance payouts had to do with interior damage due to moisture. Getting the electrical grid back up and restoring that is critical. The infrastructure would allow that to happen. As a resident, I'm absolutely sympathetic to the accountability issues that are necessary here. We have a saying that we say reaction is exponential. When we react to these storms, the costs go up exponentially, and we're paying for that year after year. If we have 6 storms in 5 years at $200 million a storm, what if we have 6 storms in the next 10 years? That's $1.2 billion we're going to spend reacting. Spending the money today is a proactive way to move forward. If we spend $800 million and we reduce those costs of recovery, we're doing better in the long run and reducing the costs and making housing in New Orleans more affordable. If reaction is exponential, maintenance is logarithmic. When we're reacting to these storms and we're spending money to repair all these things, that is less money that we have available for the maintenance to keep those poles above the 5-degree incline and to keep the system actively working. It is the accountability aspect, not this plan for Operation Gridiron, that is debatable in our view. In our view,
That's your time,
this plan
sir.
makes
Thank
it. Accountability is another matter.
Monique
Thank you.
Harden, followed by Elizabeth Sochak.
Good afternoon, council members. I just want to first start out by saying to Councilmember Green, thank you for your comments to Entergy's presentation on the need for investing in our community, our businesses and our workers. That's critical. And the 20% goal or aspiration that Entergy has set is basically saying there won't be any. And to Councilmember Moreno, responding to that situation by calling on Entergy to report on how it's going to achieve the federal Justice 40 incentive for 40% of benefits from this kind of a grant, as well as the city's goal of 35% are key. And I would just suggest you put a timeline on Entergy's report and circulate it with a newsletter from the council members. This is what Entergy said. The overall resolution, so I'm Monique Harden. I'm the Director of Law and Public Policy.
I know who you are.
Okay, at Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, in case anyone wants to know. And we are generally in support of the resolution going forward, but I just am concerned about the dynamic that took place here in this meeting where we looked at the existing distribution system and no report backs at all, even when asked by a council member, Harris, sorry. We looked at the situation of the gas plant where Brian Gilead was the lead in selling a false bill of goods to the city of New Orleans for the gas plant. And again, no accountability by the regulatory affairs person who says it worked in Hurricane Ida. It didn't work as a generating power plant. It worked as a switching station. And to pay $200 million with over $400 million in financing for a switching station is a lot to ask or be proud of if I were in Entergy shoes. So what we're looking at now is another request for more money for resiliency, and we don't have good accountability to acknowledge when projects don't work. But, and we don't have good follow through on reporting on the work done. And so, I'm just really concerned about how you all move this thing forward, that, what can be done, lessons learned to get this company to do what it should do for the people of New Orleans.
I'm sorry, that's your time, Ms. Hart.
Okay, can I just say one more thing? Just the Department of Justice Antitrust Division says that Entergy should be divesting its transmission system, and it has yet to comply with that investigation and that call and its commitment to the Antitrust Division at the U.S. Department of Justice, and that should be kept in mind by this council.
Thank you, Ms. Harden. Elizabeth Soychak, followed by Moby Makbul.
Hi there. Thanks so much. I'm here as a member of 350 New Orleans, Climate Reality Project Greater New Orleans chapter, Energy Future New Orleans, the EFNO Coalition, which Deep South Center is also a member of. Monique just spoke to us. I'm a pillar of Justice and Beyond. I'm a supporter of Reverend Manning's Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition, a member of Together New Orleans through Climate Reality Project and St. Anna's Episcopal Church. And the reason that I'm rattling off all these names is because I'd like to echo, what people have been talking about today is the accountability for Entergy. And all the residents in New Orleans are behind you, the council, you, the committee, holding Entergy accountable. How are we going to do that? And you are the regulators. You have that power. We are behind you. And after Ida in this city, there was a lot of, there was a really large appetite to hold Entergy responsible for what happened after that storm. And so this is another chance to really put their feet to the fire. And if this money is going to be spent, how are they going to answer to our requirements? And I would like to say that 350 and Climate Reality Project support the specific demands for the reporting. And we also applaud your requirement that Justice 40 guidelines are met. Thank you. Know that we are with you in holding Entergy accountable. Can't emphasize that enough. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Moby Makbul.
Good morning. First of all, the council should be asking Entergy what happened to that money they've been collecting every month since Hurricane Katrina for the resiliency project. Second of all, that example, you fool me once and then you fool me twice, then I'm fooled. They sold a $60 million power plant for increasing capacity for $240 million. You can Google it. I have my my college roommate who has put 250 power plant all over the world. The power plant cost is $500,000 per megawatt. They sold us, and some of you are guilty of putting that 30-year snooze on the consumer, that they sold that plant for $250 million. Then, as far as the capacity, as a CELA program manager, sometime I had to wait 6 to 8 months for their transmission line to be taken off for us to do some work under the transmission or near the transmission work lines. The third thing is that how can you guys sleep over things like that when we see in our bills fuel surcharges, whereas they are supposed to be producing electricity from nuclear power? And I really thank you, Mr. JP, for telling them you cannot compare Florida to Louisiana. We have 1/3, maybe 1/4 the population. And I'll close this argument that I'll give you an example. After Ida, the crew needed a room to stay right across from the airport, old terminal. The owner told them, we don't have electricity. Guess what? The same evening, they had over 200 of their crew members staying in that hotel, and the electricity was restored that same day, right after Ida, whereas just down the river, 1 mile down the river, it took 3 months in St. Rose, locality to get the power restored. So why are they trying to fool us? They should be paying, and they got 400. You can research it. They got $400 million from the federal government after Katrina. Where is this money? We need to audit them.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Do I have any online comments, Aaron?
We have 7 online comments.
Okay, go ahead.
The first online comment is from Brittany Kendrick. Hi, I'm Brittany Kendrick, licensed professional civil engineer that specializes in water resources and resiliency practice. Stormwater and minimizing flood risk is an ever-present challenge for the city, but is becoming an overwhelming and under-resourced and niche knowledge area in formulating and standardized area of expertise. Luckily, my career has been built in this area and find New Orleans to be a hotbed for establishing hardening such stormwater management practices as a national model. Which brings me to a concern that the proposed resolution limit approval. I'd like to ensure that those whom are granted approval authority have the expertise in decision-making. Specifically, at least 3 approvals must require a licensed professional engineer specialized in water resource management, like myself, to ensure science, fact-based approaches are applied when sustaining the integrity and functionality of this critically important city of New Orleans. Jonathan Anthony Roberts. Considering the comprehensive strategies outlined in the resiliency resolution, how does the committee plan to balance the immediate financial implications for ratepayers with the long-term benefits of infrastructure resilience? Specifically, are there measures in place to ensure that the economic burden on residents is minimized while effectively implementing these crucial storm hardening and resiliency improvements? Marion Penny Freistadt. To honorable council members and the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee, I am writing in support of the Alliance for Affordable Energy's suggestions regarding storm hardening and system resiliency, docket UD 2103. While we are in favor of the projects such as the addition of battery storage to the New Orleans Solar Station, we also favor an amendment increasing the specificity of monitoring and reporting for 1, infrastructure, number and types of investments and the cost of these investments, number of line structures, number of structures to be hardened, line miles to be undergrounded as applicable, downstream customers, those addressed by investments. 2, resilience, for example, but not limited to, customer minutes interrupted, CMI, SAFE, SADI, CADI, and CAFE on normal days, major event days, and for all days, breakouts of SAFE, SADI, CADI, and CAFE for vulnerable communities. 3, health. Number of deaths and hospitalizations related to grid outages. 4, affordability. Cost for ratepayers, dollars. Percent for costs allocated to LMI ratepayers, rate impacts for ratepayers, dollars per kilowatt hour. Bill impacts for ratepayers, dollars. Benefits, dollars. Percent of benefits allocated to LMI ratepayers, benefit cost ratio. Number 5, workforce, jobs, trainings, apprenticeships, related to construction, operation, and maintenance of investments, participation in these opportunities by local community members, including students, and new partnerships. Thank you. Lily Thompson, I stand totally with TNO, asking the council to support community-based resilience, such as Community Lighthouse, as this very much needed for goodwill, health, and solace of those desperately in need. Thank you for your vote of support. Jennifer Neal, As a New Orleans resident, I perform a significant amount of my work from both my home office and my downtown New Orleans office. I am in support of Entergy New Orleans' Resilience Plan, Operation Gridiron, because it will improve the city's grid resilience and reliability. Power is critical to the New Orleans business community, and I believe it is imperative that we continue to strengthen and upgrade our infrastructure. Accordingly, I am in support of this initiative. Thank you. Finally, from I Am Tucker. As a resident and as a New Orleans small business owner, I am in support of the Entergy New Orleans Resiliency Plan, Operation Gridiron. Consistent, reliable power is essential to all of us, and especially to small companies like mine. I support this initiative as a measure to improve upon not only our grid resiliency, but also upon the access to opportunity that an endeavor like this presents for small minority businesses if carried out properly. I hope to be a part of any measure that makes this community stronger in every possible way. Those are the comments.
All right, Aaron, thank you. Real quick, just based on feedback that I've been receiving, hearing from the public and your comments. One, Jesse and the Alliance for Affordable Energy, you certainly have a point on continuing to work on the reporting requirements. I know that you and Together New Orleans have been voicing this, and we put some things in the resolution. I think there's work for just some additional tweaks. I'm not going to be able to verbally make those right now because I'd like for you to get together with my staff and Aaron to work through those, but we should have those ready for the 22nd when this would be adopted by the full city council. So let's start there. The other piece too, Together New Orleans, you're right. I think it is important that we consider projects that are not just necessarily coming from Entergy, but coming from different organizations as well to increase resiliency within our city that can be like what we've already been building, such as the lighthouses. And I hope, Reverend Manning, your lighthouse over at your church is going well and operating correctly. Good. That amendment I can do verbally. The other thing too is that there's a line on page 20 that's a little tricky, that it talks about the council denying approval for all remaining projects of phase 1. I want to make it clear that it's not that we're denying, it's that we are deferring for further review by the council and further action by the council, because there are very important projects, and I don't want anyone to think that we're just just wiping those away, right? And so let me read out this sentence, Aaron, and I'll give you my copy so that you have it. But on page 20, line 2, it's going to read, the council defers approval of all remaining projects in phase 1 of the resilience plan pending further review and action by the council, and will consider additional projects by community organizations. Okay? Any objection to this amendment? Hearing none? All right, the amendment is adopted in committee, so please add that to the resolution, Aaron. Okay, I see no additional public comment on this, so with that, I will make a motion to adopt the amended resolution. As soon as the machine pops up.
Councilmember?
Yep.
To be clear, it's your intention to place this on the regular agenda for the February 22nd?
Yes, because we're also going to need amendments coming from Alliance, so I'm not going to be able to put it on consent.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I've moved. Council Vice President Morrell has seconded. All in favor? 4 yeas, no nays. Thank you. And I believe that completes our agenda. It does. So I'll Councilmember Green, I'll let you introduce your favorite motion.
Well.
A motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Seconded by Councilmember Morrell. Thank you all.